start that first. Sorry, one more thing, Yoshiko, before I hand it over to you. We also have closed captioning. So if you'd like a closed caption of the program today, please select the caption option on the bottom of your screen. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Yoshiko to get us started.
Hi there. It's really an honor to be part of this gathering. Thank you for joining us today for this Sudo for Solidarity webinar put on by our Child Family Detention and Police Prisons and Detention campaigns. My name is Yoshiko Yato, and I'll be our co-host for tonight, along with Kiku Hughes. We are gathering today on Fred Korematsu Day for Civil Liberties and the Constitution. Fred T. Korematsu was a national civil rights hero. In 1942, at the age of 23, he refused to go to the government's incarceration camps for Japanese Americans. After he was arrested and convicted of defying the government's order, he appealed his case all the way to the Supreme Court. Though the Supreme Court ruled against him, arguing that the incarceration was justified due to military necessity, Fred dedicated his life to fighting for civil rights for Japanese Americans and other communities of color. We are honored to be gathering today on the anniversary of his birthday to honor Fred Korematsu and his legacy. His personal motto that guided his actions were, "Always stand up for what is right." His life serves as a model for us in the Japanese American community to stand firmly in our convictions and speak out whenever anyone is targeted as unjustly as Fred and the other 125,000 Japanese Americans and Japanese Latin Americans who were targeted 82 years ago. We want to give out a special thanks to the Fred T. Korematsu Institute, led by his daughter, Karen Korematsu, for continuing the fight for civil rights by uplifting his legacy, including fighting for the establishment of the Fred T. Korematsu Day for Civil Rights and the Constitution, which is now an official holiday in California, Hawaii, Virginia, Florida, New York City, Arizona, New Jersey, and now Michigan. Sudo's Child Family Detention and Police Prisons and Detention campaigns are working together to continue the legacy of Fred Korematsu and others in our community who stood up for what is right. As Japanese Americans who are survivors and descendants of survivors of the U.S. concentration camps, we will help play a role to draw connections between what our community experienced during World War II and what immigrants, asylum seekers, and other people of color are experiencing now. It is a part of this work that we are gathered here today to hear from leaders in the immigrants' rights movement, to share how immigrants are being targeted today by Senate leaders and the Biden administration, who are trading away immigrant rights at the border for foreign military aid, to the ongoing targeting and incarceration of immigrants in detention centers across the country. This year, Sudo is deepening our work as part of a campaign to shut down the Northwest Detention Center, led by La Resistencia and alongside a coalition of other organizations in Washington. We will share more about our plans next month to honor the anniversary of Executive Order 9066 with a week of actions in the Seattle-Tacoma area, to say clearly that it wasn't okay when our community was removed from our homes and communities and incarcerated indefinitely in 1942, and it isn't okay now. I'll hand it over to Kiku Hughes.
Thanks so much, Yoshiko, for that important context about why we're gathered here today. And yeah, without further ado, I want to introduce our first speaker. Marumora Villapando is a dear friend of Sudo's and a warrior for immigrant rights. She herself is a proud immigrant, born and raised in Mexico City, and has spent more than 2 decades working for racial justice and immigrant rights in the U.S. She's one of the founders of La Resistencia and a powerful organization dedicated to end all detentions and deportations and to shut down Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma, Washington. Maru is also the founding member of Mi Gente, a national digital organizing Latinx group. And I'll hand it over to you, Maru, if you want to speak more about your background, or just talk about La Resistencia, about the campaign to shut down Northwest Detention Center, and especially, yeah, what you've been doing and what La Resistencia has already been doing.
Thank you. Buenas tardes a todos. And great to see great people. For those that I can see, I assume that there's more great people that I cannot see, but I can tell you I really don't like to see myself in Zoom, so I rather use slides anyway. So I think it's less boring when we actually have a talk, but then we can also have images. And yeah, I founded Resistencia. It's officially in our anniversary is in March, but actually I came up with this idea of shutting down for a day deportations back in October of 2013. So it's been 10 years already that I came up with this. It wasn't like my single idea, I just pretty much was copying other people that were doing similar things throughout the country, undocumented people that were sick and tired of deportations and detentions. And because we launched a civil disobedience outside the detention center, finally in February of 2014, that's the born of Resistencia, because people in detention saw what we were doing and they reached out to us a couple of weeks later after that civil disobedience and say, well, if it's true that you say you're against detention and deportation, you should start helping us because we're doing a hunger strike. And we have done it since. So La Resistencia came out of very organic organizing, both outside and inside the detention center. And it became a unique formula of, no one had tried this before, that, as far as we know, of trying to organize with people in detention. And especially people in detention that were willing to risk themselves by putting their bodies at risk by not eating, but also at risk of retaliation by not only Immigration Customs Enforcement that decided to put him in detention, but also by the private corporation that owns and runs the detention center. That's Geo Group. The reason why it was important to do the civil disobedience is because back then in 2014, it had already been 10 years of the detention center being open in Tacoma, and almost no one knew about this place. And here in Washington, there's this idea that Washington State is very progressive, especially the Seattle-Tacoma area, very blue, blah, 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 very welcoming to immigrants, and a bunch of ordinances here and there saying, we welcome all immigrants, yay, give us your labor, and cheap labor, by the way. But yet, we have one of the largest detention centers in the country, almost no one knew. It's placed in right in the heart of the tide flats in the Port of Tacoma, a Superfund site where no one should be living. It's not that area in general doesn't have anything that relates to residency. It's all factories and industry. Yet the detention center was built there, and so by then it was 10 years of this place being open. And like I said, it's one of many of the private companies being run, and so it's a business, right? So what we did is we went against Obama. We as undocumented people said, Obama needs to come to terms to his yes we can slogan. And so we targeted him when we started. But once he was gone, we realized there's nothing we can do there, right? There's nothing we can do at a federal level. It's just not possible. And so we started switching our strategies. And I want to share with you what those strategies look like. So if we can go to the next slide. So Resistencia is very different now what it was back 10 years ago. But it remains the same. The contract that Geo Group has with ICE is still there. It's a contract that will expire next year. The last time it was reauthorized was in 2015. Prior those years, the contract was being renewed every 5 years or so. But once we started in 2015, they renewed for 10 years. So it expires in 2025. And then what we have is that throughout all this work, in 2021, Geo and ICE decided to switch, and they actually renew the contract every year as well. So it's complicated because we have this collaboration directly between ICE and GEO. And so this is not a detention center like many others where, you know, the city's involved, there's some permits here and there, maybe the county. That's not the case here. And they play that quote unquote federal protection to avoid any oversight from the state or the county or the city. That also helped the city, the county, and the state to avoid responsibility. So we decided to jump on and get a bunch of different strategies to mobilize at local level. And I'm gonna start with the Freedom All campaign in a second, but I just wanted to list them first. So you see, we have all these campaigns, and there's actually one more that we're gonna have soon. Just to show you that there's no one single strategy that works here, right? Because again, this is the decision to shut down this detention center remains in the hands of Biden. And Biden, remember, promised us to end all private detention, yet he didn't. On the contrary, he has expanded it. So we really stopped focusing at federal level and we switched to this local and state level. And that's really where we have been more successful. And so that's why we have different elements, because we're hitting different targets at local and state level. And that's why they look different. And I'll go through each of them. But the first campaign and the biggest strategy we have is the Freedom All. And if we go to the next one, the next slide, please. This is the main, the reason why we started this work, which is we respond every time there's a hunger strike. And so we don't really keep track of how many hunger strikes there have been, because really it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to sustain the organizing of people in detention when they go on hunger strike, because like I said, it's not only that they're putting their risk, their lives and their health at risk, they're also retaliated against. And so just this year, we started right away, the first days in January, a hunger strike started by mainly asylum seekers, all from India. And it was just incredible to see that, again, we just had ended 2023 with a hunger strike that lasted 52 days. We were all really tired. And as soon as 2024 starts, this group of people that had probably no idea that another strike had just ended, they decided to start their own. So when hunger strikes happen, the first thing we do is we need to know who, we need to know when they started, and we need to know for how long and what the demands are. And we need to know who is on hunger strike, because we know they're going to be retaliated against. We know they're going to be sent to segregation or the hole, as is also known. And some of them will be deported. You know, sadly, that's the reality. The hunger strike prior this actually got a lot of great victories. They got a lot of people to be released with cheap, quote unquote, bonds of $3,000 versus the $30,000 that we usually see. Let me tell you, this detention center is the one with the lowest bond rate in the entire country. In comparison to the rest of the country, this is the place where hardly anyone gets released with a bond. And if they do, it's really expensive bond. And if you don't have the money, then you don't get out. That's it. So when the last hunger strike of 2023 started, we saw a lot of people getting released with, again, you know, what we consider cheap bonds of $3,000. And in this case, with these guys from India, as soon as we thought it ended, we didn't hear anything from them again. We just couldn't confirm, you know, if people were released or not. We assumed that people got retaliated against. And so what we do is that we talk to each of them that we can. This one was a bit difficult because we didn't speak the language, but we were able to get volunteers that spoke their language. And for a couple of them, what we do is a Freedom All. And so if we go to the next slide, a Freedom All campaign looks like this. A person in detention tells us, I want a public campaign, I want support from the community, and this is what I want you to say about my case. So we don't talk about the legal case, we talk about the conditions, right? So this is Patty, and this is the one campaign we just launched today. Patty is a trans woman that is detained in the men's unit. She's been detained there for several months now. She was detained back in 2015. And when we were about to launch her campaign, the ICE decided to release her and send her to a prison in Tri-Cities. And we had to find her. We couldn't locate her. And then we found her in this prison. And even the prison was like, we don't know why she's here. I brought her here, but you know, you can just pay $200 bond and she can get out. And so we did. We did pay the $200 and she was released. She was under a digital program, which is another program that we'll talk about later, another campaign, where she had to go and report herself every year or so to ICE. And all of a sudden last year in one of those check-ins, she was re-detained and we still don't know, we don't understand why. And so for us, we would never say, oh, well, she was detained because of this, or her criminal record looks like that. Oh, she doesn't have a criminal record. Yes, she's a good person. We would never say that. We don't care why people end up there. What we care is to get them out. And that's why we call it the freedom all, although right now we're focused on Patty, we're still saying freedom all. And nobody should be there because of the detention conditions that people are facing, which is part of what the hunger strikes brought to light, right? So every time you see a hunger strike happening, you will see the demands. Usually top one is food. It's ridiculous to think, right? That food is always the main problem in this detention center, along with the lack of medical care, the fact that ICE officers don't visit and people don't know anything about their cases, bedding, underwear that has been worn by somebody else and is, you know, stained. Right now, the detention center is not only dirty because the GO is not paying people to go and clean as it should, but it's also, the place is falling down because now people are not working there anymore for $1 a day. And so they need to paint, there's water leaking, there's mold coming in on the showers and on the walls, you name it. And so that's what we focus on. We're saying, first of all, the place is horrible, conditions are horrible, but she's in danger. She's a trans woman. She shouldn't be in a men's unit to start. And there's a lot of abuse by guards towards her just because she's a trans woman. So that's the kind of push we create to do this public pressure. And now let's go to the conditions. Let's go deep into that. So what we did is that back in the day, I really refused, because I did years ago, I did lobbying and I did a lot of public policy, and I believed that we were going nowhere with public policy. I decided to go on to civil disobedience. But then I had to come to terms and work on some public policy starting 2020. And so we moved policy at a state level and we introduced bills that actually, you know, I was surprised that we were able to move the bills that we moved really, really easily in a state legislature. And it shouldn't be, I shouldn't say it was easy and I'm surprised, but that's the reality, you know. Usually you don't get a legislature that is on your side and legislators that are willing to fight and name names and talk about racial injustice. But I think that after all the work we've done, we mobilized the legislature starting 2020, and almost every bill we introduced, it went up ahead. We didn't have really a lot of problems. And we introduced a bill, HB 1090, that ended up in our bill didn't end up in the courts, but the bill that we modeled after from California, AB 32, ended up in the courts, and they lost because the courts said, well, states don't have the right to tell the federal government who should they contract with for detention of immigrants. But the states do have the right to regulate those businesses. And that's where HB 1470 came to. Since we lost the bill that said we don't want private detention centers in Washington, we say, okay, can we regulate? Wonderful, then we'll do. And so we created HB 1470 in 2022. We started coming together with people detained at the moment and their loved ones and those that had experienced detention, and created the bill that said, well, you know, let's have the state going in and inspecting the detention center And this is what they should inspect. So we came up with a huge list of things. The bill passed. Obviously, we have to deal with bureaucracy now. The Department of Health has to create rules of what exactly is going to look like, that list, when they go in and inspect. But in the middle of all this, obviously, Geo filed a lawsuit and said, you know what? I'm not going to let you in because nobody should come in because I said so. And so they filed this lawsuit, and they thought just by filing that lawsuit makes them, like untouchable. And they have not allowed all year 2023 Department of Health nor Labor and Industry to come into the detention center. As a matter of fact, Labor and Industry came back twice. The second time they came with a warrant, and yet Geo was like, no, you're not coming in. So now the Attorney General filed a lawsuit against the Geo, saying, no, you have to let us in. And this is important because now it's not us fighting Geo. Now we have the state fighting Geo, not only us, right? So that's for us, it's extremely important. Okay, so I'm just getting a message if I can pause for 5 minutes. And I can do that. And then we'll come back and do the other stuff.
Thank you. Sorry. I'm sorry. I was trying to give you a 5-minute warning. Do you want to, do you think you could go over a few more of the slides in the next few minutes?
Oh, okay. I thought you wanted me to pause right now. Okay, sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
So like I said, this time now what we have is the state fighting the fight, not necessarily us. So this is the importance of HB 1470. So if we go to the next one. We also have a campaign to shut down the deportation flights. We did it once, we can do it again. And we're focusing on the company that is servicing the flights, and Stan is one of the main characters here to support this fight. We go every week to observe flights, and now we're launching a campaign against deportation flights taking off from the King County Airport. In the next one. We just met with the governor to, he's leaving, he doesn't care, but we have to do it. We want him, before he goes, that he's not our friend. He was never our friend, and he will never be a friend. In the legacy that he's leaving is that he agrees that the Department of Corrections, the Department of Prisons, should continue collaborating with ICE. There's a law here that we passed in 2019 that he signed that prohibits all state agencies except DOC. He excluded DOC. So we went to this meeting just to tell him in his face that we're not forgetting that. And that's a campaign we're gonna relaunch to stop this collaboration between the Department of Corrections and ICE. The next one. We have another campaign, which is the Environmental Justice Campaign. And these are pictures from last month that there was a fire right across the street as we were doing a vigil for a Congress strike that was happening. We saw that, the fire crews were coming, and there was this building right across the street from the detention center catching fire, and it's not the first time. There's been a ton of fires around, and remember I said at the beginning, that's an industrial zone, and it's a very dangerous zone, and now we have fires happening quite often. And so that's another campaign in which we're collaborating with a bunch of other groups that are fighting, the Superfund site that is the Port of Tacoma, and we're asking them to bring NWDC into this fight. And the next one. And we also have our Solidarity Days, of course, that's important for us, but we also join with other countries around the world. We are working with people in London, in Canada, in Argentina, in Spain, and so on, so forth. And so that is important because we are in touch with them, and we're kind of learning what's going on in other countries that is very similar to what we're seeing, either to predict what's going to happen or to share with them what's happening here. We might end up being the same, because this industrial zone, it's exactly the same as for many other people. The privatization of immigration detention is an international business, right? And the next one. So all of that I mentioned are different tools within, right? We use public policy, we use direct action. We have also litigation. I didn't mention a lot about it, but I just said that people are not put to work anymore for $1 a day. And I can share more about that later. Most of our work is coalition work. We bring a lot of organizations to the table. And really what works for us is public pressure and also media work that we rely on, a lot of our media. In the next one. Oh, I think that's the last one, right? Yes. So basically what we ask of all you is to make sure that we can count on you to join all this. There's plenty to choose from, basically. And there's way more information that I can share in this time, but yeah, I'll stay here for any other questions or comments that might come up later.
Thank you so much. Thank you for such a thoughtful and sort of comprehensive explanation of the campaigns, and also for such clear ways for us to engage. And I know we're going to come back to that later on. So thank you so much, Maru, for getting us started. I want to turn it over to Gerline Joseph, who's another close friend of Sudu's. Gerline is a leading human rights advocate who dedicates her life to bringing awareness to issues that affect us all locally and globally, such as immigration, domestic violence, child sexual abuse, and other human rights issues. She's the co-founder and executive director of the Haitian Bridge Alliance, a US-based nonprofit organization that advocates for fair and humane immigration policies. Haitian Bridge provides migrants and immigrants with humanitarian, deportation defense, legal and social services. It has a particular focus on Black immigrants from the Caribbean and Africa, the Haitian community, women and girls, LGBTQA+ individuals, survivors of torture and other human rights abuses. She is also the co-founder of the Black Immigrants Bail Fund and the Cameroon Advocacy Network. Gerline was named one of Politico's 2021 40 Most Influential People on Race, Politics, and Policy in the United States for her leadership, and is the recipient of several prestigious awards, most recently the Las Americas 2021 Border Heroes Award, the 2021 Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Award, the 2022 National Haitian Elected Officials Network Community Champion Award, and the 2022 American Immigration Lawyers Association Arthur C. Helton Human Rights Award. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Gerline.
Thank you so much for having me. I come to you very tired, so I apologize for that. Thank you, Maru, for this great presentation and really setting up the understanding of what we are dealing with. And what you presented is what we are dealing with across the country, which is a sad, painful reality. I think a couple of things I want to highlight when it comes to the immigration prison system. I want to highlight, and I know with many previous work with Solo for Solidarity, we have highlighted that the current immigration prison system was built and created for Haitian refugees who were coming to the United States in the 1970s. So the very idea of what we are living today when it comes to immigration detention was created for me. So I know very intimately what that looks like. I have been in too many of those spaces where just hearing the door close behind you, you can imagine the pain, the mistreatment, the abuse that goes inside of those walls. So really wanted to highlight that and center that in anti-Black racism, and saying thank you to the Japanese American community for continuing to highlight, for continuing to partner, for continuing to collaborate. And as we say in Haitian Creole, mette main, joining hands as we move forward. I can also briefly highlight that we had a deportation flight to Haiti last week, and we are expecting another one tomorrow. And we are seeing not only those being fly out of the country, but they are being flown out from the border. So to quickly give a brief highlight of what's happening currently at the US-Mexico border and what we are hearing on the news with the Senate Republican pushing for a complete closure of the asylum system of people seeking protection as we know it. What we see and hear on the news is the reality that Black and Brown and Indigenous people will be paying the brunt of what will be put in place. Earlier this morning, we still had meeting with many Senate offices, and I'll be honest, the hope is fading. And also the fact that President Biden actually is willing and agreeing to give in without paying attention or without giving consideration of what that will mean for Black and Brown and Indigenous people at the border. Even agreeing to give away his power to provide legal, quote unquote, legal pathway, such as the CHNV parole program and the use of CBP-1 to allow people to get paroled in what they say regular ways to people to migrate. So we want to make it clear that the Senate Republican is not just talking about people at the border, but talking about a way to make sure that there is no access regularly or irregularly for people to seek safety, for people to seek protection when it comes to Black and Brown. But we also understand that the way they are centering that is rooted in anti-Black racism. And as Maru mentioned, we are calling on all of our allies, all of our partners to stand against any policy that will gut the asylum system, that will make it impossible for people to come to the United States. And what that will look like. We are at a cusp of a major, major change in our immigration system, but it's not a change for the best. It's not a change for a better tomorrow. It's a change that will literally continue to kill people. As I'm speaking to you right now, we are in the middle of putting funeral arrangements for a young man who was transferred from the border in Mexico, pushing him back to Tapachula. And while he was in detention in Mexico, he died. And there is no reason why that should have happened, except for the same system we see in the United States is being exported outside of our borders, into Mexico, into Guatemala, into Panama, into Colombia, where they are building centers to detain people under the guise of providing protection. So I think it is necessary that we keep our eyes open and we push back and we call our senators. And if this bill was to pass in the Senate, we have to push really hard on the House to make sure that this doesn't happen. Again, these are the realities at the border. Right now in San Diego, we are receiving about 500 people every day. And out of those numbers we are seeing, about 60% of them are people of African descent. About 10 to 15% of them are folks from mainland China. And the rest is from around the world. So we also want to make sure that when we speak about people at the border, when we speak about asylum seeker, that we shift the narrative, that we highlight Black folks, we highlight other people, we highlight the indigenous people who might not speak Spanish, but do not have any access to language justice, or somebody from a tribe in Cameroon who doesn't speak English or French. They only speak a tribal language. How are we receiving them? Or somebody from China who only speak Mandarin. How are we able to provide the support that is needed? Because we are really at a critical stage right now where if we don't do anything, we are going to see more death and more heartbreaks at the border and in the country. I don't have to really make a plea because this is what we do, and continue to push for the closure of detention centers. Suru for Solidarity, Haitian Bridge Alliance, and many other partners were able to push and close a detention center in Pennsylvania. That was a big, big victory. But they turned around and opened it literally after a year. So they closed the family detention center, they reopened it as a women detention center. So we want to make sure when those detention centers are closed, they are not reopened only under any pretense, because that will only continue the same abuse, the same unfairness, just switching the group of people they are caging in those places. I'm looking at time. I don't know if I have more time to share, but I can stop here because I know we also need time for questions.
Thank you, Gerline, and thank you, Maru. So I'm Stan Shikuma. I'm one of the members of Suru for Solidarity based here in Seattle. Use he, him, L pronouns. I'm going to be asking some questions and facilitating this last section. So for both of you, just to start off, what is your long-term vision of immigrant justice, and what gives you hope in that fight? So,
Maru, you want to go first?
Okay, I get it, Gerline. So I'll do it. I was about to tell you, but you got first. All right. I think that it's important to realize the fight of our Haitian brothers and sisters, because the problem that I've noticed, and I'm not, unique here, is that since the start of this large fight for immigrant justice, it was very Latino, it was very Spanish speaking, and it was very anti-Black, right? Very assimilation of all of us. I remember back in the day, years ago, marches would happen and people would say, why don't you speak English? Why don't you have your American flag with you? Cover yourself from the sun, you're gonna get too dark. All these things that we have tried to address. And I think we have, but we're not there yet, obviously. And so I think the long-term vision that I see is for a real integration of all of our movements from all our nationalities to address anti-Blackness, to address sexism, to address elitism, classism that is happening in our communities. Obviously, Islamophobia, you name it, transphobia. I think that that's something that is still quite a problem in our communities. I think that the movement in general has been really good at taking the lead. Ourselves have found the space that we needed to lead as immigrants ourselves. Because I remember back in the day, we had a bunch of groups being led by white people, and then, they would talk about immigrant rights, but it was white people leading, or people that were US citizens, that they didn't have the experience that we had. Now we are there. But that doesn't mean because you're an undocumented immigrant or you're a Latina, you get it. It doesn't make you progressive. Your identity doesn't really make you right. And I think that's what I would like to see in our movement. And precisely this is so important for us to have so many different nationalities, so many affinity groups, whatever you want to call it, coming together, not only coming together and fighting, but also having those conversations. What does it mean to be pro-Black? What does it mean to be pro-woman? What does it mean to be for all trans communities? And so my hope is that we have the time to create those intersections and that learning and unlearning all the bad things that we have. But because we're always in crisis mode, we don't give ourselves that time. And so I wish that through all these partnerships, we find those times to have those conversations to make the future of the immigrant justice movement a true justice movement, not only for immigrants, not only for a few, but really for everyone in every issue.
Mhm. Yeah, no, thank you so much for that. And I think for me is really humanize immigration. Too many times people don't see, they see immigration as a subject or as a problem, but they don't see immigration as a human right, and they don't see immigrants as full people that are deserving of all the things that people in general are deserving of. Many times when I speak about people, and they will say, "Oh, we don't serve immigration issues, but we do women rights, and we do reproduction rights, and we do X, Y, and Z." And then I have to say, so then you do serve immigration, and you do difference, because at the end of the day, I woke up this morning as a woman, as a Black woman, deserving and needing of all those things that are being mentioned. But I think for me is, how do we move into a space where immigrants are seen and valued as people? And so once that happens, a lot of those other things will follow. Because once you are seen as a human being, then your right will be expected. And I remember when the Black Lives Matter was in full force, and people will say, "But what about this life? What about that?" Is those lives were always mattered, right? But until we bring in the reality of those who have never had a voice, those who have been erased, those who have been abused, to value those lives and understanding how we are all connected. So that's my dream, that's my hope moving forward, that as a movement, we collectively come together, as Maru mentioned, and be able to make the world and leave the world a better place as we found it.
Thank you. Important words, important thoughts. So another question that came up is, I think right now there's a big fight over the narrative, and so the Republicans have kind of captured the narrative, with Trump's, rapists and criminals coming across the border, and it's everyone coming across as carrying drugs and all those kinds of stereotypes to scare people and create fear. So, what do you wish people, like the general public, not just our organizers, the people we're working with, but what do you wish people in the public understood better about the work you are doing and the fight for immigrant rights?
Okay.
You want to take the first
Okay,
round?
Maru, I'll start this time, and then I'll pass it on to you. The reality is all false narratives, right? And I remember last week, or 2 weeks ago, they made a big they caught a big shipment of fentanyl coming across, and that was the big news of the day, that the border needed to be closed because they had this big fentanyl issues, and fentanyl was coming to the border. But what they failed to mention is that the fentanyl that was coming to the border was being bought by US citizens, by American citizens. And so the moment the people, the public in general heard fentanyl at the border, everybody got scared. And then automatically they connect that to immigrants. They connect that to asylum seekers without thinking these are two different issues. And the people who are bringing in the fentanyl are not the immigrants, or not the asylum seekers, but US citizens who are a part of doing those activities. And for me personally, I always try to speak to the world outside of our world, those in Midland America who are rough on whatever they hear on Fox News or whatever, they are being fed, is to really, again, humanize that. Put yourself in the person's shoe and see the reality instead of just accepting what you hear, the false information. But we understand the power of the media and the power of false and misinformation that drives all of those issues that brings the fear. So if we can find a way to dispel the myth and clear the fear for folks, I do believe that people will respond in a different way. As a matter of fact, the majority of America do approve of immigration, do want immigrants, but the narrative that's being shared, that's being sold, and that's being fed is where the problem is.
Absolutely. I think that fear has always worked, you know, in creating campaigns against specific people. And that's the history of the United States, right? So it's been based on fear, and the fear of specific groups. If it wasn't the Filipinos, it wasn't the Chinese, and if it wasn't the Irish, you know, end up being Mexicans, and you name it. And that's why for us the narrative is so important, and that's why we emphasize all, right? Everyone. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter how they came into the country, because when Trump came into office, we saw this big avalanche of people supporting asylum seekers. But if we said, oh, this person was in prison, people are like, I don't think so, right? So this pick and choosing, that's what is makes our work so much difficult. And I really don't like saying this is the civil system, but I emphasize it because if you actually end up in the criminal justice system, you end up having way more rights than in the civil system. And so it's important that people know how immigration, customs enforcement, and really the immigration system in general created this system that is, it really allows for the violation of human rights constantly, right? It's legal. It's legal what they're doing. It's not right, but it's legal. And so when you already have a system designed to be against people, I had a call with someone today, and this woman is in total disarray, you know, she's totally depressed. I called her because she wanted to talk to me. I try not to make video calls with a lot of people in detention because I feel like if I talk to one, I should talk to everyone. And she's telling me how horrible she feels, how depressed she is. She doesn't have the right medication. Yet she's trying to stop others from doing things because they are taking medicines that are making them, you know, I don't know how to say in English, but they're getting thoughts of violence. So she told me, you know, there's these women that sometimes say, what would have happened if I pushed that person down the stairs? What would it happen to me if I just punch someone in the face because I'm really angry? And she's the one telling people, calm down, you know, let's go out and walk. Now, we're listening to all this. What do I say? You know, how do I respond to her? And the only thing I told her is, you're completely right. Everything that is happening to you should not happen, but it's designed this way. It's designed so you give up. It's designed so you have to end up getting all this anger that is justified against the person next to you versus really the anger that we should have against ICE, because ICE is the one that decided that you should be here. And this person used to be in prison. And so I know that when we launch a campaign, people are gonna be like, but she's not an asylum seeker. She's not the perfect immigrant. You know, she was in prison. What did she do? And so that narrative is harmful and it plays fear, right? The fear is what pushes us to not act, or to act defensively, or to not even think. And so as long as we continue allowing that division and that tiering of who deserves and who doesn't, that's what makes our work way more difficult. And that's why we need to push more and more into, yeah, they were in prison, so what? You know, I really don't care what they did. It is a human being. And, you know, I can hear maybe a cat back there. I'm pretty sure that people love their cats and they don't want them in cages, or your dogs. how do we allow nowadays people still being in cages? If we love our animals and we even now have our little strollers for them, we don't want to even walk them anymore. How is it possible that we still allow or think that it's okay to cage people?
Wow, thank you. So I'm looking at time, we're running short, so I just have one last question and just short answers. But you know, with all the problems that we have and all the things that the administration is doing and the Republicans want to do and Abbott is doing, and what gives you hope? Like, how can you keep going? Really quickly.
Yeah, what gives me hope is a young man who sent me a message and said, "You might not remember me, but you met me in Tijuana, and you gave me some food, and you gave me a pair of shoes and a toothbrush. But I am now in Maryland, and I'm still wearing those shoes, and I still have that toothbrush." And now he was from Cameroon, and because of our advocacy, we're able to win TPS for them, and now he's working. So those little wins that might not be a big, splash in the grand scheme of things, but to know that over the past few years, we have been able to win TPS for almost 500,000 Venezuelans, over 300,000 Haitians, 40,000 Cameroonians, 20,000 Ethiopians. Those little things give me hope. And knowing that I am not on this by myself and seeing the changes within the movement, that's what keeps me going. That's what gives me hope.
Absolutely. I think that, the fact that we're all here right now, the fact that you all are planning all these amazing actions along our friends here in Tacoma, knowing we're not the only ones calling for the shutdown of the detention center, right? And I just talked to one of our advisory board members that is in Mexico and was deported, and I called him yesterday and I was like, "Hey, I need an audio from you. We're gonna have a press conference." He called me today and said, "Yeah, what do you need?" He got deported. We weren't able to keep him home, but he's still involved, and he's like, "We'll fight whatever it takes." And he works graveyard shift. So he apologized because he said, "Sorry, I was sleeping." And I was like, "Oh, that's why I called you late, because I thought you were working, right?" And so regardless of the situation he's in, he's fighting. So no one else would be in the detention center. He knows he lost. We might not get him back anymore. We'll fight for that, but we might not. But he's like, it doesn't matter. What we need to do is to shut down that place, and no one else should go through the same experience I went through. And to have them leading our fight nowadays, that I know that at some point I'm stepping back more and more, and others are taking it on, and you all care about this, we're gonna be okay, and we're gonna be better than okay. We're gonna win.
Well, thank you. So the hour's kind of flown by, so I want to thank both of you for sharing with us. I just have to say that two things that give me hope are the two of you. That we have that kind of leadership and energy is really inspiring. So I'm going to pass it off to Kiku to close us out for the evening. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was incredible and very moving. And I think a lot of us are feeling that despair recently with so much happening, not just in our country but around the world. So little things like this and hearing your words it really meant a lot. So thank you so much. I'm going to try to keep it really quick. I just want to remind all the members of La Resistencia and that we, the purpose of this webinar was to get people familiarized with the fight to shut down Northwest Detention Center so that we can really show up in our days of action that are coming up in February surrounding the Day of Remembrance. So a reminder that we're going to be observing Day of Remembrance on Sunday, February 18th. At 1 p.m. at the Puyallup Fairgrounds, the same place where our ancestors were taken and incarcerated. And that'll be the part one of the event, which will then continue as we move to the Northwest Detention Center at 2:30 for a solidarity rally. There's also on Friday, February 16th, so 2 days before the Day of Remembrance observance, we're having a virtual rally and power hour, which will involve a live stream of an event in Seattle, and the power hour will be calling your representatives, talking about Northwest Detention Center, demanding that ICE be kicked out of Washington, and we'll have more materials and things for people to get on board for that. But keep those 2 dates in your calendar, and if you're in the Seattle area, make sure to show up at Northwest Detention Center at MPUL, but especially Northwest Detention Center on February 18th at 2:30 p.m.
Thank you all so much for coming. I put some of the stuff that Kiku just mentioned in the chat, so please take a look at it. Thank you so much again to Gerline, to Maru, to Stan, to Yoshiko, to Kiku for being wonderful speakers and organizers of this. And thank you all for joining us tonight. I hope everyone takes care.
Thank you. Bye.